Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Confessions of an Invisible Girl. Confessions of an Invisible Girl is a Brazilian comedy that tells the story of a teenage girl named Tete who feels like she can't be accepted as the person that she is, both at home and at school. After both her parents become unemployed and the whole family has to move in with her grandparents who are located in Copacabana in the city of Rio de Janeiro, Tete has to start a brand new social life over from scratch at her new school that she's attending, which initially proves difficult due to her introversion. While she does make a few friends in her class at first, she also has to contend with a crush that she develops with a boy in her class, as well as dealing with a bully that she frequently comes into conflict with, who also happens to be the girlfriend of that same boy in her class. So there's a lot of variables at play with this movie's story. At its core, it's very much a fish out of water scenario in which a character tries to adapt in an environment that they don't belong in, or rather one that they feel like they don't belong in. This premise does sound cliche, but fortunately the characters help to make it stand out. Tete was a great protagonist for this movie's story. She undergoes a variety of struggles in it that range from being embarrassing at best to downright humiliating at worst. Even though some of the things that happen to her in this movie are funny to a certain degree, because we see them all unfold through Tete's eyes, we get to develop a sense of empathy and understand just exactly what she's going through and how it affects her. Her character constantly has to deal with things like negative self-perception in terms of body image, how her family always wants her to be happy and stop being so sad all the time, and like I mentioned earlier too with the bullying that she experiences at school as well. There's so many things that happen to her in this movie, and her actress does a fantastic job at making her character come to life. Her character's desperate need to be seen as normal by others and her journey toward discovering the beauty of her own uniqueness is by far the best thing this movie has going for it. There's a lot of supporting characters as well that help elevate the story along with Tete. Way too many to get into in this review today, but there are a couple that I'll mention here that stood out to me. First, there's Davey, who's the first friend that Tete makes at school, and he happens to have a crush on the bully's best friend at that school, and it was really interesting to see how that all played out on camera. Then there's Zuka, a character who's openly gay at school, but behind the closet when he's around his family members. I think it's kind of weird how he says out loud that he chooses to live life on his own terms, but at the same time he hides his sexuality from his family members when he's in front of them. But in the end, I still think his sexuality was portrayed well for the most part, made better by the fact that none of the other characters in the movie ever seem to make a big deal about his sexuality, not even the antagonists. And then there's Eric, the guy who Tete has a crush on while at school, and he's essentially portrayed as this happy-go-lucky guy that just wants to play music in his band and have fun overall, but he can never seem to relax when he's around his girlfriend Valentina, the girl who constantly bullies Tete throughout the movie and is essentially the main antagonist of the story. There is a reason that's given as to why she's a bully in the first place, but honestly it's not done very well. All of these characters range between being good and mediocre, but I wouldn't necessarily call any of them bad. The thing I like most about all these characters is that they all have some depth to them, even if there's only like one or two things that make them stand out. For a comedy movie, it's enough for the audience to get invested in them and see them play out the rest of the story along with Tete. With so many characters featured in one movie, it's no wonder why the filmmakers made this a comedy from the outset. Much of this movie's hilarity stems from the sheer variety of awkward situations that Tete and her friends find themselves in, and in this regard, the comedy is done very well. Some of it is more innocent and lighthearted in nature, like for example when Tete is browsing through Eric's Instagram page and she accidentally clicks like on one of his shirtless photos that he has on his page, and the entire time Tete is just panicking as to what kind of reactions people will have at school the next day. Other times it's more physical and slapsticky in nature, like when Tete's getting ready to go to a party and she has to get the hair on her face waxed off, and the entire time she is screaming in agony at the top of her lungs, and when it's all said and done, her face is just red like roses and she is furious. That scene was super funny. I think my favorite element of comedy in this movie though is how it makes use of fake out flashback scenes to make the audience believe that one thing is happening and then it travels back in time to show what is actually supposed to be happening on screen, usually with some sort of cheeky narration provided by Tete. These scenes are never overused to the point that they outstay their welcome, and each time they happen they are always hilarious and threw me for a loop, in a good way of course. I will also say that there's a healthy amount of drama to be found in this movie. It seemed like every character had some sort of issue they were trying to work on throughout the story. While I do appreciate that this movie is a comedy first, at the same time I do think it's good that those dramatic elements are there, sort of to help keep this movie grounded and to stop it from being completely silly. This being said though, while I ultimately did enjoy watching this movie, there were a few confusing weird things about it that I thought could have been handled a bit better. There's a supporting character in the form of Samantha Samantha, who's just not developed enough. She only appears in like 3 or maybe 4 scenes throughout the movie and never has any effect on the story at large other than in one specific scene that, in my opinion, is done very poorly. I never got the sense that the filmmakers had any idea of what to do with her character. I think the love triangle that happens later on in the movie between Tay-Tay, Eric, and Davy's brother Doo-Doo is rushed and incomplete. Doo-Doo in particular is a weak character from the start because he's introduced halfway through the movie and the audience never gets any time to see his character properly develop. And this movie's ending, dear God, was it ridiculous. I mean, it is the longest game revenge scenario that I've ever seen a character commit to in a movie thus far in my life. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it in this review, but it is just silly. And of course, at the end too, when all the characters are suddenly friends with each other despite all the grievances they had throughout the story, I don't know, it just felt cheap. Overall though, in spite of these flaws, Confessions of an Invisible Girl is a fun comedy with some dramatic heft to it that makes its audience consider how we treat others. If you enjoy comedies and you're looking for one that has a good moral message behind it that's backed up by a variety of interesting characters, this movie is definitely for you. While some of its characters could have been developed better and its ending is just plain bonkers, I still enjoyed watching this movie. It has a serious message behind it about bullying that, as an educator, I'm very happy to see, and all of its fun scenarios and characters made it an enjoyable experience for me. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Confessions of an Invisible Girl. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the German dramatic thriller Je suis Karl. Bye bye!